We are continuing. Ashley did the intro last week. Our series, The Story Isn't Over. The Story Isn't Over. All right, we're going to be going through the Joseph story in Genesis. And as Ashley and I were kind of praying and talking and wrestling out, and I'd say in a good way, it is wrestling out these series because we want to give it the attention that it needs, and figuring out what what God's doing in our life, what we feel like our church needs to hear, what the end goal is, and kind of the problem we came up with that we wanted to address. I gave you a few minutes to look at some beautiful Joseph artwork from the Renaissance era, which we'll get back to that in a second. I'll bring that back up in a second. The problem we wanted to address is when our circumstances, our reality doesn't match what we feel like God has promised, or the dreams God has given us, right? When reality doesn't seem to match what should be God's truth, right? How do we engage? How do we move forward? How do we deal with that when our circumstances do not match our God-given promises and dreams, right? That addressing that moment in life, not just one moment, that probably is more of a constant moment or several times throughout life. What do we do? What do we do when the reality is not matching what we feel like should be true? Now, sometimes that's on us. Sometimes we misunderstand what should be reality. I think kind of the very classic one, and I do this in all my SCU classes, like Proverbs 22:6 says, "Raise up a child in the way he shall go, and when he's old, will not depart from it." And people think, well, I went to church, so my kids, have to be this way. That's kind of misunderstanding of what Proverbs is. Proverbs is a proverb. It's not a promise. There's also different ways to interpret it. But right, so there's sometimes we think, God, you have to do this. That's kind of on us. Like, no, you're missing it. Or I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but you've heard of maybe like the prosperity gospel, where it's like if you just believe in God, He's gonna, give you nice clothes and a nice car and a nice Jesus had no home for His head and was not treated the best. And so that's I don't think is always the truth. Sometimes I think God does bless. He's a fountain of blessings, and there's definitely He can do that, and He does do that. But just to say, you come to church and you raise your hands, you're going to get a bigger paycheck, that's on us to believe that, right? That's not how God works, right? So sometimes it's on us, but a lot of times it's this seems true, God, and I thought you've given this to me, or a specific promise for my life, and yet it's just not lining up. So what do we do in those moments? So that's kind of is what this series addresses. The story isn't over. The Joseph story we're going to go through has so many twists and turns, so many ups and downs, so many times where it seemed like the dream was coming true, only for it to be shattered, only for God to then turn it in a new direction. The story isn't over. So I'm going to ask you, if you can, to stand in honor of God's word, and we're going to read our series verse together. Read it out loud all together. This is Genesis 50:20. Now, spoiler alert, this is the end of the story, and so we kind of know that there's going to be a quote-unquote happy ending. It's going to wrap up well, and this is the words of Joseph. He says these things in verse 20. Can we read this together? You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. Amen. Jesus, let your word become alive in our hearts. Let your spirit help us hear what we need to hear today. Amen. Amen. You may be seated, church. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good so I could save the lives of many people. Right? That encapsulates, we felt like this idea that difficult things can come, but God can turn it into something good, yes, for yourself and for others as well. And so there's kind of two big takeaways, two arching thoughts that I think will be a constant throughout this series. One is we operate in days and weeks and months, but God operates in years and in generations. Our timing is a lot smaller. We think, things should be different by now. Things should have changed by now. That my timeline is this. And God often has a much, much bigger picture. Because I don't know if you've heard this before, but the world doesn't revolve around me or you, actually. There's actually other people, having life, and the world's going to keep spinning after we're all gone. God's doing something bigger than just us, but we get to be part of it. That's exciting. We operate in days and weeks, and God operates in years and generations. And so on one hand, we want to give some perspective and be reminded that the God we serve is a big God. And when we feel like he's late and he's behind, could just be he's just getting started, right? The other thing is that God can take any and every part of our life and turn it into something good. Any and every part. The deepest suffering, what seems the most minute or boring or normal parts of life, he can take any part of it and turn it into something good and turn it into something big, even in ways we don't realize. But every and every part of that means he's never done. He's never done. And if he's never done, then neither are you. There's no season that's too young that God can't start working. There's no season too where you're just focused on family and day-to-day and career, where he doesn't just pause and say, well, wait till you're retired so you can have more time for me. There's no season too old where it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to. No, he can take every part, every season of our life and turn it into something good. So if he's never done, neither are we. Right? And taking something and turning it into something else, turning it into something better, that's kind of the basic idea of redeem, if you know the term redeem or redemption, right? It's I take one thing, give it back, redeem it into something good. I think of when my cousin and I were in 7th grade, we got tickets to the WNBA Cleveland Rockers. They used to have a WNBA team, and we got these vouchers, and it very clearly said, not a ticket on it. And that became like a meme for us. We would just joke with each other, like, not a ticket, not a ticket. The idea was you had to take this voucher and exchange it for the actual ticket, right? Redeem it for something valuable. You turn it in, and you get something better back. That's the idea of like redemption. You take something, get something real back. God can do that. He takes these seasons of our lives, these vouchers, and he can turn it into something real and valuable. And yeah, spoiler alert, God is going to use the seasons in Joseph's life for something good for himself and for those around him. That's the idea. What can be intended for harm, God will redeem it and can redeem it. And church, we're not the center of the universe, but he can do that for us as well. Each individual, what you're going through, and us as a church together, and the church as a whole here in Big Walnut, and the church in America, and the church, he can take every piece and turn it into something good for his glory. All right, so Ashley shared last week, she set up the series, and a core idea starts with the promise to Joseph's great-grandfather, Abraham. God promises Abraham, I am going to bless you, multiply you, and your family is going to bless the entire earth. And really, most of the Old Testament is kind of that drama, that tension of, this family's pretty messed up. Are they really going to bless the entire earth? This family, these guys? Like they're the ones going to bless the earth? And like as the story keeps going, it gets more and more hopeless. But that really is so core to the story of God's promise to Abraham. Your family is going to multiply and bless the whole earth. We keep seeing how much of a goofball this family is, yet how gracious God is to keep choosing them and using them. And so with that in mind, we go into his great-grandson's life, Joseph, this family. Okay, what kind of family is this that God has chosen to bless the whole earth? So we're going to step into the Joseph story today, and that's going to be our next 6 weeks, is this story. And so here's the roadmap today. We're going to go through chapter 37. So if you have a Bible with you, I encourage you, have it open. There's 35 verses. We're not going to have most of them on the screen. We're going to walk through the general movement of the story. But if you have a digital or printed version, and I encourage you, especially through this series, bring a Bible with you, just because we're covering big chunks of story. It's tough to put tons and tons of verses on the screen. But we're going to go through chapter 37, the opening chapter of the story. Then at the end, I'm going to offer kind of really just one main observation from a unique point of view. POV, that means point of view. Point of view, a unique point of view from the story, and one observation. Really, I want us to walk away with one main observation from this story. You could preach a dozen messages from this chapter, right? Can't preach everything, but we can take away one thing. And then the very end is how we also see Jesus through this idea, this observation, and this chapter. All right, so that's our roadmap. We're going to go through the chapter, have one observation, and then see how Jesus appears in that as well. All right, so Genesis 37. Genesis 37. The story opens. Joseph is 17 years old. We meet Joseph. Now, I think it's important to get an understanding of how this family tree works, because there are 12 sons, could be daughters as well. They weren't always kept as records as much in those times. Do we have a picture of that family tree? So Jacob had 2 wives. And again, this is a messed up family, guys. I think sometimes we sanitize the Bible like, oh, these are the heroes of the faith. These are the heroes of being messed up, crazy people. All right, so Jacob was in love with Rachel, right? I don't know why she's blonde. I guess that was a creative choice by whoever made this. Jacob was in love with Rachel, and yet his uncle deceived Jacob into marrying Rachel's sister Leah, right? Talk about soap opera right there. So Jacob marries Leah by accident, and then he ends up marrying Rachel as well, the woman he actually loves. So now he has 2 wives, okay? He has 2 wives. Leah, the unloved wife, keeps having kids, which for all in human history up until like this past generation was a good thing. People now are like, oh, kids are horrible. Like, no, they're still good. But back then, that was a good thing. Like, so Leah kept having kids. God was blessing her by giving her kids. So now Rachel feels left out. So Rachel says, okay, Jacob, sleep with my servant. Okay, Bilhah. All right, talk about drama. So Jacob sleeps with Rachel's servant and starts having kids. And now Leah gets jealous and is like, well, take my servant too. So now Jacob has 2 wives and 2 servants who are now baby mamas of his kids. And then finally, Rachel, the woman he actually loves, has kids. Has a kid, Joseph. All right. So we see like the backstory of this drama. This is the family that God said is going to save the world, right? All right. This is how Joseph comes into the scene. He is the like the 10th kid in a line, but he's the first son of the woman Joseph actually loved in the very beginning. Right? So there's a lot of layers here. And then Joseph has a younger brother through Rachel, his mom, but then Rachel dies giving birth to Joseph's younger brother. So Joseph is one of the youngest, which also in those days wasn't the best. Usually you got inheritance based on order of age. So he was the youngest. He only had 1 brother, and his mom died. Okay? So not very happy moment there. But Jacob, because, remember, he loved Rachel he actually loved in the first place, and then Joseph, because he was a child of old age, is what it says, Jacob loved Joseph more than his other brothers. Right, so Jacob showed favoritism. How many people think that's a good idea in a family of 12, is to very clearly have a favorite? Is that going to cause any issues, do you think? Yes, and it did. It did. And more than just, oh, love, I like them. There's a story, if you go back a couple chapters, there's a story where Jacob literally uses the other sons and their moms as a human shield against an army that's coming to attack him. He puts them out in front and keeps Joseph back in the middle with Rachel. Talk about, I don't like you. And now ended up, that was Esau, his brother. They ended up not attacking them. But man, if you use some of your kids as the outer layer of a human shield and kept your favorites in the middle, that would create some tension later on, I think. I don't know if they had therapy back then, but that would be a lot of money for therapy. But so there are some dynamics here going on. Jacob loved Joseph, who was the son of the woman he actually loved, but now she was dead. And it says he loved him more, and all the brothers did not like Joseph because of that. And another interesting thing is Jacob had a twin, Esau. And we know from the story that Isaac, Jacob's dad, favored Esau. So Jacob experienced favoritism in his family, and it did not go well. Jacob felt the pain of that. He had to deceive his brother and his father to get the things he wanted from his dad. And now Jacob is doing the same thing, showing favoritism. Isn't that how it goes? We repeat the wounds that have been committed to us. We pass those on. So the brothers hated Joseph. All right, are we kind of getting idea of we're settling into season 2 of this dramatic, family right here? The brothers hated Joseph because Joseph was the favorite. And these are not 12 and 13-year-olds hating a 5-year-old, because that is kind of understandable. You're young. You're just jealous. These are grown men in their upper 20s, 30s, and even 40s possibly. Right? Joseph is 17. So these are grown adult men who says they are hating their younger brother. And I just make a comment. I think people, regardless of our age, we make life-defining choices either fleeing the pain or pursuing the favor from a parent. That seems to be true. We make crazy decisions, somehow thinking this will earn me the favor of the father or mother that I never got. We'll hate on a teenager simply to try to even that feeling out. All right, so this is the scene. Joseph, the younger son, the loved son, the hated brother, but he has a dream. He has a couple dreams. Genesis 37. Verses 5 through 7 and verse 9. One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. Joseph did not have a lot of reading the room ability. And then he had another dream, and again he told his brothers, listen, I've had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing before me. Now, Joseph had 11 brothers. So what did the 11 stars represent? The brothers and the sun and the moon. The point of the dream is clearly that Joseph would be superior to his family. Right? I'm going to be your king. I'm going to be your boss. Whatever. You're going to bow before me. I don't think I would have the confidence to share that dream personally, especially if I already knew these people hated me. Right? This is kind of fuel on the fire, or you're just so oblivious you need lessons or something. Now, what's interesting is the story doesn't explicitly say if these are God-given dreams or not. It's just that he had a dream. I guess if you read the story, they kind of came true. But the story doesn't say. It just says he had a dream. You're going to bow down before me. Now, also keep in mind, no one in this family is showing good character. The dad is playing favorites. The dad is kind of oblivious. The brothers are grown men hating on a teenager. And Joseph, again, he's either just really annoying and he's pushing the needle and like he's living the teacher's pet life up to the fullest, or he just is completely oblivious. Right, but no one's like the hero. This is just everyone's messed up and making bad decisions, and the fuel on the fire is just growing. Right, so we get where we're at. Joseph has these dreams, tells his brothers, even tells his father, and Jacob's like, what are you talking about? We're not going to bow down to you. But then it says Jacob just kind of held it in the back of his mind. All right, so then the story kind of shifts. Jacob sends Joseph out to find his brothers out in the field. Now, again, for us, this is like go in the backyard and find them. No, this is those days. Again, we're talking about brothers with probably their own wives and kids. These are dozens of people probably finding pasture land over 100 square miles. So this is Joseph. Go out into the next county and try to find your brothers, right? No GPS, no cell phones. Again, Jacob does not show a lot of awareness of what's going on in his family, right? If the brothers all hate Joseph, you don't send that brother alone to go find them out in the middle of the wilderness, or at least it's not a smart idea. But Jacob sends Joseph out to find the brothers. Go find them. Oh, also it said earlier that Joseph brought a bad report about his brothers. We don't know if it was true or not, but he was a tattletale as well, right? We don't know if that was the right thing or not thing, but he wasn't afraid to make his brothers look bad and make himself look good. We know that. He sends Joseph out. Joseph can't find them, and he runs into a man who says, oh, yeah, I heard them talking. They're going to this other city, Dothan. Joseph says, okay, thank you. And he goes and he finds him. Now, was that man in the wilderness an angel, or was it a coincidence? We don't know if it was a man or an angel, but it seems like a pretty high coincidence that Joseph just happened to run into someone who heard his brothers talking about where they were going. It really seems like God divinely guided Joseph to find his brothers. And as we're going to see, it ended up costing Joseph a lot. And that can be hard to wrestle with, that divine guidance led Joseph into his greatest personal suffering. And maybe that can happen to us sometimes too. And if it does, we just have to trust God. What if God actually does, like Joseph, lead us into our greatest period of suffering? He divinely organizes our suffering. That's hard to swallow, but he's a God who might do that because the story isn't over. It's a bigger story than we can see. All right, now verse 18. To me, verse 18 is an important shift because from here on out, Joseph does not really have he's not the main part of the story. Things happen to him, but we don't hear his words, we don't hear his actions, we don't hear his thoughts. It's all about the brothers and their thoughts and their action and their dialogue. Joseph's brothers now become the main players of the second half of the chapter. That's important. We're going to hold on to that for later. Joseph's point of view is not, it kind of disappears until the whole next chapter. Joseph finds his brothers, and they see him coming, and they decide, hey, let's kill him. And the oldest son says, no, let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in a pit and let him die, which is kind of the same thing, right? It just makes you feel a little bit better about yourself. And don't we justify things like that? I didn't kill him. I just threw him in a pit in the desert and left him with no food and water. Like, he just died of natural causes, I guess, right? Like, that was let's throw him in a pit. They throw him in a pit. And can we put that picture back up? Trying to incorporate some artwork. We don't do a great job of that in our tradition, using artwork like other church traditions do. Now, this is from the 1500s, and I don't think they ever saw a camel, whoever drew this. I don't think they knew. Or camels looked way different back then. But this is a picture of Joseph being pulled out of the pit and being sold. And if you can see Joseph right in the middle there, I don't know if you can see that there's just a deep sorrow on his face, and I think sometimes we miss, like, it wasn't like Joseph was just like there quietly. Like, he would have been begging for his life and screaming and weeping, and don't do this. And this, I guess jumps out to me a reminder of the age of the brothers and how much younger Joseph would have been. These are grown men selling a teenager, getting rid of their own flesh and blood. Again, this is from the imagination of a 1500s artist, so it's not completely accurate, but it's interesting the way they understand the story to go. Right, forcing Joseph, who is most likely weeping and crying and terrified, much younger than them. It is interesting. When I was 17, I felt pretty grown up, and now that I'm 36, I feel like 17-year-olds are like kids. And probably when I'm older, I'll feel like a 30-year-old as a kid. It's just, that's how it goes, right? You always think people who are younger are much younger. And so they're selling this kid, these grown men getting rid of a kid. It was a horrible decision. It was an evil decision. They betray their brother. They sell him. They were going to leave him. But Judah says, oh, let's sell him. Let's make a little money off of him at least. And also he says, that way we won't have to hide the evidence. Or in the Hebrew, it says, that way we won't have to cover his blood. We don't have to cover his blood. Hold on to that phrase, cover his blood. They betray him and they sell him for silver. Joseph is now gone. Now they have to figure out how to tell their father about his favorite son. And so they kill a young goat and they dip his robe. It's a robe of many colors or a fancy robe. We're not really sure what the phrase means, but his beautiful robe, they dip it in goat's blood. And they sent it on. They didn't bring it themselves. They sent it with a messenger with a message. Hey, look what we found. Doesn't this robe belong to your son, is what they say. Notice the distance. And they're like, oh, hey, what is this? Is this your son's robe? Not, oh, we found this. Is this our brother's? Notice how they're just like that mental, like trying to distance yourself from what we've done. It's cowardly. It's cowardly. I can't help but notice that they deceive their father with animal blood, just like Jacob deceived his father with animal skin, if you know the story. Yeah, they're repeating the mistakes and the failures of generation to generation. We do that. We take the same things, and we, with all our resolve, we're not gonna be that way, and yet we keep falling captive to that same cycle. We do the same things, same tools for the same crimes. So Jacob sees it. He knows it's his sons, and he assumes what the brothers want him to assume. Oh, a wild beast. Maybe those camels got him. A wild beast must have ate him, and this is his blood. And it says Joseph mourns, and he refuses to be comforted. His family tried to comfort him. Verse 35 says, "No, I will go to my grave mourning for my son," he would say, and he would weep. Jacob gave up. Basically, for him, this was the end of the story. I love Joseph so much, there's nothing else for me. And I think we do that too. Things, and I don't want to make light, deep things, unspeakable things can happen to us, and we basically say, this is now my identity. I am the person who lost this. I am the person. I want to be very honoring, but there's someone we knew in our past church life. She was a widow from a young age and had some sons, and it seemed like that was still her main thing, is I'm the person who lost my husband 20. And I'm not saying it's not a horrific thing or that she should have grief about it, but there's more to, I felt like she missed out on living some life because she held on to that. That's my identity. I'm the person who lost their husband at a young age, and that's kind of what she just stuck with for 20, 30 years. We can do that too. For Jacob, the story was over. My life is over. I'm going to go to the grave just mourning my son. I will never be happy again. I will never have a good day again. The story wasn't over. So that's the chapter. Go be blessed, everybody. No, it's a tough chapter. Betrayal and failure as a family and sadness. So from the point of view of Joseph, right, thinking ahead to this, how the story is going to end, we can take away, man, God can take difficult things and he can bless me with those difficult things. Yes, that's true. Another point of view is God could take the things that happen to me and turn them into a blessing for the people around me. That's also true. And we're going to deal a lot of that over these next few weeks. Our old pastor would say, I'm going to treat my life like fertilizer. If dung gets scooped on me, I'm going to make it fertilizer for the world around, right? You get stuff dumped on you, I'm going to make things grow from it. Yes, that's a good perspective. But here's the perspective I want to touch on, and here's kind of the one thing I want us to take away today from 37. The main actors in the second half of the story, we can go, I think we can go to that, to the side from the brothers' point of view. They're the main actors in the second half of the chapter. What they do is key to the plot. They're the ones who committed a great evil. They sold their brother into slavery. They did that. They did something evil. And yet, just peeking ahead to the end of the story, Joseph, their brother, ended up saving them and their whole family because of that. They set up their own salvation through their evil actions. And that is not to say, well, go do evil because it's going to save you. No, that's to show how gracious and creative God is. Their very act of betrayal is what God used to set up their own salvation back towards them. Their betrayal led to Joseph going to Egypt and saving many people, including themselves. God can take evil and turn it into good, yes, but here's what I want us to take away today. God can take our own evil and turn it into our own good. The evil we give out, and I'm not focusing on the evil. I'm not saying, oh, you're just evil, horrible. But we've hurt people in our lives. I would say we all have, and to some extent. God can take even the evil we give out, and he's so good and gracious and creative he can redeem that back towards us, something good. That's the kind of God we serve. That's the kind of God we see in Genesis 37. Remember that phrase in verse 26, we'd have to cover his blood. That phrase, that's what caught me and kind of gave me the impetus for this message. We have to cover his blood. They wanted the blood to be covered But what ended up happening is that evil they did, the blood that they were going to shed, or you could see it as their blood, their flesh and blood, ended up being what covered them. They wanted to cover the blood, but their blood ended up covering them. To me, that's just a cool way to write a story, where God flips things and reverses things and fills it with irony. I think God is a creative storyteller, and their blood ended up what ended up covering and saving and keeping them safe from harm. Again, we can get into theology and if you're understanding of atonement, there's that Jesus' blood covers us, and I think that's in there a little bit. We'll touch on that. They wanted to cover his blood, but it was the blood that ended up covering them. What a reversal that God worked towards the villains of the story. He brought salvation to the villains of the story. Again, it wasn't just ignore. It wasn't, okay, slavery, then this, then this. In spite of all that, he can save them. No, it was literally through that. It was because of that ended up saving them. And I don't want us to focus. This isn't. We have sin. We've committed harm. When I say evil, I'm not trying to focus on how bad we are, but on how good God is. Even if and when we commit evil, he can return that evil that comes out of us back to us. That's what I want to focus on, is how good he can be. There's a story from the South. Two neighbors. One of them grows up. Their father plants a tree. The other one does not have a good home life. As they grow, the tree grows. The son takes over the home. The tree is fully grown. The other neighbor just never has a great life. On that tree, they carve the initials of he ends up getting married. So the man and wife carve their initials into the tree. They put a tire swing. They have kids. The neighbor gets so jealous. Something happens. He just gets so angry and jealous of the other neighbor who has a good, successful life with the tree in the yard with the tire swing. Middle of the night, he goes over and he chops the tree down. Chops the tree down. Just out of spite, out of anger. The other neighbor, the neighbor with the tree who was harmed, grabs an axe. What is he going to do? Go chop the other neighbor's tree down, right? No, he chops up the tree into firewood. He bundles it with the rope from the tire swing, and he takes it over to the neighbor's house and puts it on his porch as firewood for the winter. That's an act of compassion, forgiveness, and mercy that encapsulates what God showed us. The evil that the one neighbor did, I'm going to chop down your tree. The other neighbor said, the evil you did, I'm going to bless you with that very same evil. You destroyed something special to me. I'm going to make sure you have firewood for the winter and take care of your family. So what's the other neighbor's response, the bad neighbor? It has to be only gratitude, and there has to be some kind of healing there, right? Like that act of kindness, that act of reversal and compassion has to inspire some kindness. The evil the one neighbor did was literally returned living through the winter, as survival and hope and salvation. We can choose to keep enacting revenge and keep chopping each other's trees down. Or we can follow God's example of taking the evil that's done and returning it into good. God can turn our own evil into our own good. And here's part 3. He did that with Jesus. I love seeing Jesus in these stories. It's my favorite thing. Right, we can look at it as Jesus' brother, Judas, betrayed him, right? Sold him for silver, just like Joseph's brothers did. Or we can also see it as Jesus' brothers. The New Testament calls people Jesus' brothers, humanity as a whole. Right? Don't get too individualistic here. Think of humanity as a whole. Jesus' brothers, humans, sold Jesus into death, betrayed him, and yet God used that betrayal and that death to save us. Our brother, who was loved by the Father, was sent to find us in the wilderness. Jesus came to seek and save what was lost, just like Joseph, but we betrayed and we killed him. Yet this act of dying on the cross is what God used to then resurrect him and exalt him and put him above all powers and authorities. We did this with Jesus. We humans, we betrayed our brother, Jesus. We sent him to the cross to die because we wanted to be our own lords, our own bosses. And instead of returning that cross to us, which we deserve, God used that cross to save us. God said, okay, you're going to nail my son to the cross. Well, I'm going to put on your own sin, your own shame, your own guilt onto that cross as well. That same thing you're trying to hurt me with, I'm going to free you with. God did that as well. It wasn't in spite. It wasn't, okay, die on the cross, now resurrect, now Jesus go save us. No, it was that exact thing. It was the cross that we betrayed Jesus on that God used to save us. Just like the brothers in the Joseph story. God is so creative. He's so gracious and so merciful. He can turn our own evil into our own good. That's the kind of God we serve, church. All right, so what? The story isn't over. Whatever you've gone through or are going through, the story isn't over. God can turn your own evil. He's so good. He can turn not just the evil done to you by others, not just hard things that happen, but even your own evil, he can return it back to you in good. And there will be lots of this series of things that are done to you. All right? So don't walk away with, I just think you're all evil. I think we recognize that we've done things that are not right. I want you to walk out with, wow, God is so good. Even the brothers, even the messed up brothers who should have known better, God saved them. God saved them through their own evil, and he can do that with us. He has done that with us, with Jesus. So you may think you may have messed up God's plan for your life. I know we have some parents in here, and as a very new parent, man, it's a heavy thing, and you want to do really well. And I already 3 years in. Tasha turned 3 yesterday. There's things that like, shouldn't have done that. I lose my temper at a 2-year-old. Like, right? There's some regrets we carry. And maybe you're feeling like your regrets as a parent and your failures as a parent is the main thing about you. And if I had just done this differently, my life would be. Maybe those shortcomings, those regrets, maybe those are the things that God is going to use to maybe spark real and vulnerable, deep conversations. Maybe those very things you wish you could take back are what God is going to use to build a deep family connection. I don't know. He can do it. Maybe you're trying to follow Jesus, but there's substance stuff or there's promiscuity. And I'm not calling out different things, but maybe God's been dealing it with you, and you feel like, well, this mistake or this flaw of mine is what defines me. Maybe God's going to use that very shortcoming to give you a platform to speak to other people about it. Maybe God's going to use that very thing so that you know his grace and mercy better than anything else. The story isn't over. Give one more example, and we're going to close. Can I have Lacey, who's coming for piano? We're going to open some time for prayer here in a second. I think of Nikki Cruz. Nikki Cruz is famous story from say 60s, 70s, New York, in a violent gang member, had a horrible childhood, became a gang member, the leader of the gang, violent, arrest after arrest after arrest. No, a psychiatrist declared the only end road for this kid is prison and then hell. There's no hope for the way his brain works. He was a violent gang leader, yet God, through a preacher, somehow saved him. And all the violence and all the crime Nikki committed is what gave him a platform to share and speak and yes, make a living for himself, but also then share hope with other people. The very things he committed is what God used to give him a testimony. That's the kind of God we do. Not just the things done to him. Not just, I got attacked by a gang member and I'm okay. No, he was the lead gang member who committed violence. And God used that to give him a story and a platform. God is so good and creative and merciful. Our own evil we give out. Our own shortcomings we give out. God's like, yeah, you messed up here. I'm going to take that very thing and give you some salvation and some goodness with it. That's the kind of God we serve. Whatever it is you think that disqualifies you, maybe because through his creativity and his grace, that's going to be his masterpiece over your life. The story isn't over. Don't ever think it is. Don't ever think it is. I want to just invite a couple moments. If you would like prayer, or if you just want to sit in silence and meditation, or if you just need to stand and worship God for his grace in your life, I just want to create some space. Ashley and I will be here for prayer if you want someone to pray with you. We're just going to give a couple moments of space to do that before we dismiss today. The story isn't over. God will use anything and everything for good. He can. He's that kind of God. I invite you to reflect on that, worship, seek prayer. We have a few minutes to do that.
Thank you for the cross, Lord. Thank you for the price you paid, bearing all my sin and shame. In love you came and gave amazing grace. Thank you for this love, Lord. Thank you for the nail-pierced hands. Wash me in your cleansing flow. Now all I know, your forgiveness and embrace, and worthy is the Lamb seated on the throne. We crown you now with many crowns. You reign victorious, and you are high and lifted up, Jesus, Son of God. The darling of heaven, crucified, and worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb. Thank you for the cross, Lord. Thank you for the price you paid, bearing all my sin and shame. In love you came and gave amazing grace. Thank you for this love, Lord. Thank you for the nail-pierced hands. Wash me in your cleansing flow. Now all I know, your forgiveness and embrace, and worthy is the Lamb seated on the throne. Jesus, Son of God, the darling of heaven, crucified. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Jesus, Son of God, the darling of heaven, crucified. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb.
I think God's clearly doing something in some of us, breaking some things and stirring some things. And so we're just going to keep this space. This will be our official dismissal. You need to step out. Have a great Sunday, great week, everybody. We love you guys. Lacey, you can keep playing for another few moments. Just if you need to keep sitting in God's presence, the space is here. But yeah, it's our official dismissal. So be blessed, Altar Church. We love you guys. He's a good God.